Formula One has failed fans too many times, and right now it's doing its utmost to tarnish its reputation and fight against its own cause of We Race as One. By having Nikita Mazepin race for the Haas F1 team, it's just disregarding all accounts of assault that women and men have dealt with over multiple years. We say no to Mazepin. He needs to be out of our sport now. We're back. It's been a bit of a layoff, and I decided that the season's over. Everyone's doing their season reviews, what they felt, what they thought about it. But instead of doing that, I'm going to review Formula One from 2000. 20 years ago, the year I was born. What was Formula One like? I was born February 28th, 2000. This was me. Adorable little child, I know. Formula One season was only just about to kick off. So what happened? I basically just want to run through and analyse the differences. Analyse is probably the wrong word. I just want to compare what Formula One was like when I was born to now, and how the sport we all experience has changed, and what went on through those races. Was racing 20 years ago really that much better? Did we really enjoy Michael Schumacher dominating as much as people say he did? I guess we'll find out, because I sat and watched all of the races. Some of them didn't even have commentary. You know how hard it is to keep up with those races when you don't know the drivers really well and there's no graphics to tell you who's where? It's hard. It's really hard. Jenson Button crashed out of one once, and I had to wait 2 laps to find out if it was Ralf Schumacher or not. But that was the joy, wasn't it? So exciting to sit and watch Formula 1 like that. 2000 was obviously a really great year. I was born. Y2K didn't happen. Jennifer Aniston and Brad Pitt got married. Yuki Tsunoda was born. It's really depressing when you think about that. And the Emperor's New Groove came in. What more could you ask for from a year? Well, Formula 1 had what was going to be a pretty interesting battle for the title in store. Mika Hakkinen had won the title for 2 years running. Were McLaren going to be able to do it for a third? Was my main man, DC, going to win his title finally? No. It was Michael Schumacher. And that started a very long time of Formula 1 dominance from the Ferrari team and Michael Schumacher. Obviously, at this time, it was amazing. Schumi hadn't won the title since 1995. Was he going to be able to recreate the magic with Ferrari, bring them back to where they were at? Well, he did. Much to my dismay, I would much have preferred McLaren. I don't know what it is. McLaren, I have this weird affinity towards. I wouldn't say I did when I started watching Formula 1. But whenever I look back on McLaren, there's something about those cars, the delivery and the sound that they make, and then Mika Hakkinen and DC being in those seats, that just makes me love them more than anything. Oh my god, they are. DC is my man, like so much. I knew he didn't win the title, but I wanted to see him come close because I didn't know anything about the season. Things were a little bit different. We had more teams and less races. Teams that we did have were West McLaren Mercedes, Scuderia Ferrari Marlboro, Benson and Hedges Jordan, Jaguar Racing F1 team, BMW Williams F1 team, Mild 7 Benetton Playlife, Galeosis Prost Peugeot, I'm going to try to figure out what that was, Red Bull Sauber Petronas, Arrows F1 team, Telefonica Minardi Fond Metal, Lucky Strike BAR Honda. Those are mouthfuls. What's craziest about the teams is we only actually have 3 of those teams that still have the same name in the sport right now. Some have went through transitions, like we obviously saw Benetton turn into Renault. They won a couple of championships. We saw Jaguar turn into Red Bull. They won a few championships too. And Tyrrell, I think they had the most successful transition out of all of them, ultimately turning into Mercedes. We've got Jordan that's obviously turned into Aston Martin now with the coming season, and Minardi, who is now AlphaTauri. And for races, we had Albert Park, Australia, Sao Paulo, Brazil, Imola, then we've got Silverstone, Catalonia, Nürburgring, Monaco, Villeneuve in Canada, Magny-Cours in France, the A1 Ring in Austria, Hockenheim, Hungaroring, Spa, Monza, Indianapolis, Suzuka, and Sepang. Like every Formula 1 season, there's going to be changes, there's some new things coming, there's some things changing. One of the most important introductions into the sport was a rookie driver called Jenson Button. We all know how that turned out, and he ended up doing bits when he joined Formula 1. Big up Jenson, aged gracefully. My god. World champion Damon Hill would end up retiring before the start of the season. One of the big changes Rubens Barrichello would join Ferrari in place of Eddie Irvine, and it turns out being a pretty fair move for him. Obviously, he ended up kind of like the Bottas, couldn't ever really challenge, but he won races and he had a reasonably successful career. Refueling was a big part of Formula 1 at this point. One thing I didn't know was that before this, teams were using cooled fuel. So apparently using cooled fuel meant that you could fit more volume into fuel tanks, which would then mean that you could fill up the tanks with more fuel mid-race and go for longer ultimately. Didn't know that was a thing. And they banned it the mid-season because obviously it's kind of OP. V10s became mandatory in Formula 1 regulations. Before this, you were allowed your V6, your V8, your V10s. They kind of got to choose whatever they want. Well, no one had used anything other than a V10 from 1998. They were now in the rulebook that that's what you had to use. And I think that we can all say that was pretty great. Those cars sound magnificent. And I'm not even a hater of the way the cars sound now. I quite like the way like the Renault sounds. Another different thing of this season is that a warm-up session was still done before the race. Could you imagine if we had that now? Everyone just got a chance to get used to the car in the morning. They get to shake off like the rust from the day before. No, I much prefer them just having to get in the car and go. It's so much better, and they just have to be ready. I find it kind of weird. I was watching these warm-up sessions. I was like, this is odd. It's almost like just a spectator show just to see the cars go round and round. On top of that, they also only had one qualifying session that was an hour long. And it was on Saturday, obviously, like normal. But they had 12 laps maximum to set their time, and that was it. There was no Q1, Q2, Q3. And I assume that, I haven't actually looked into it, which I probably should have, but I assume that the transition to Q1, Q2, and Q3 means that there's a little bit more excitement on a Saturday instead of just watching the cars go round and round just for 12 laps each. Obviously, out of the 12 laps, it would be the fastest lap that they'd done on those tyres. They would get to take that into the race. Just a bit weird, not as exciting. I kind of like the thrill of seeing is Bottas going to snip Hamilton on the last lap. No, he's not, but it's nice to imagine. And then we got Max doing it in Abu Dhabi. You know, you can always hope for these little things, but I feel like that's not as possible in these 1 hour qualifying sessions. I can't believe that there were only 6 point scoring positions when there were 22 cars on the grid. That is mental to me. 10 seems like the perfect number, and I know that there's a late addition into Formula 1, so like 10 years old or something like that, but like 6 point scoring positions out of 22 places is mad to me. No wonder it was so difficult to score points back in the day. I already knew this was a thing, but whenever I actually consider it and saw it in the race, I was like, Jenson Button comes 7th, and I'm like, oh, that's a good finish. But really, he got nothing out of it. He was still 0 points from that race. These are some notes that I took while watching this season. I took notes for every race I watched and kind of how I felt about them and the crazy stuff that happened, but I also just took like external notes to talk about. How did De La Rosa retire 48 times in his Formula 1 career? That is mental to me. That is like 3 seasons worth of retirements right there. Is it? That's just under 3 seasons of retirements right there. He's not even that high on the list of retirements either. He's only 56 on the list of retirements. How are there 55 people in front of him who retired more than that? That is fucking nuts to me. It's so crazy. The graphics and the lack of footage, I've already mentioned it. Totally wild. The graphics are used every lap. That's how you figure out the classification and the lap times and the distances between everybody. And then the footage as well. It's like, oh, has that person crashed? We don't know how he crashed. We don't know who it quite is yet. We'll tell you in about 5 minutes when we figure out who's getting out the car. And if we're sure we're right and no, we've made a mistake, it's this person. I don't hate on Murray Walker or Martin Brundle for having to do that job. It's 10 times easier now having all the data in front of you. I commend them for being able to manage up talking for that long. On top of that, if you hate the race directors now, you would have hated them so badly back in the day. For the first 2 races, I'm pretty sure I only saw Michael Schumacher driving the whole time. Maybe we'd cut to DC or Mika going into the pit, but that was about it. They were kind of boring, honestly. I was actually a bit disappointed with like the start of the season. I was excited, I was hyped to watch all these, and I was like, oh, I'm here for the enjoyment of Formula 1 and the way these cars are, and having never watched it before. But actually sitting there for the whole hour 40 minutes or whatever, I was like, okay, this is just like watching Formula 1 now. Something this really made me miss as well was hearing the crowds and seeing the crowds. I don't miss cutting to them when there's stuff happening, but I really do miss hearing them cheering when Mika wins, when Shumi wins, when Barrichello wins. It's really nice hearing them get excited over overtakes and stuff like that. It's almost like feeling your excitement because they're excited. And I really miss that right now. Not that I would like this solution of what we have in football where it's added crowd sounds, because let's be real, you can live without them in Formula 1. It's just something that I've noticed that having watched this season, I do miss quite a bit. So for these races, I'm going to go through them, kind of like the ones that really stuck out to me or the ones that were really boring. I'll quickly say them, I'll say what I thought, but I'm not going to stick too long on the ones that really didn't do anything for me. Okay, so I was really excited going into this race, and by lap 14 there were 4 retirements. So we're down to 18 cars already. Jenson Button ends up retiring, and on top of that pain, they have adverts in the middle of the races. Why? How does that make sense? It's a race. It's like if they cut halfway through the first half of a football game, what would be the point? There's so many risks of missing crazy stuff going on at that point. Luckily they didn't. Australia was pretty tame. Nothing really happened, but it was my foray into this world of Formula 1 from 20 years ago. It was also an adjustment of getting used to the graphics and the way that they filmed these races and stuff like that, and also actually hearing Murray Walker and Martin Brundle as a combo for the first time. It was really exciting. Brazil was pretty exciting. It was cool seeing it as a second race and actually just seeing Brazil, because it's been over a year since we saw it last. Like, obviously we didn't get it this season, but the realization that DRS really has fueled silly overtakes and easy overtakes, because Rubens Barrichello spent so much of this race stuck behind DC, and if he had DRS for any of it, done. Overtake would have been done by lap 5. He would have been over with it. Ultimately, it didn't end up mattering because David Coulthard got disqualified for an illegal front wing adjustment, and Mika Häkkinen's car retired again after retiring the race before. He was so angry, he got in his car and he left. He didn't stay at the paddock, he didn't talk to any press. As soon as he retired, he went through, got changed, and left the racetrack. Could you imagine if someone did that today? They would get slaughtered for being childish and irresponsible. But when I think about Mika doing it, it's so funny to me. It's a world champion move. You're pissed. You're watching your rival literally take all the points away from you. McLaren, being 2-time world champions, were really slipping this year. Jenson Button made himself known, and that he got his first point scoring finish in just his second race. San Marino, boring. Mika finished though. So that's it. Britain was pretty exciting, but an element of this was DC ended up winning, so it's effectively his home race even though he's Scottish. But Michael Schumacher started in 8th or something around then, and he still couldn't help but being on a podium. Mika also finished 2 races in a row. Thrilling. You love to see it. McLaren really pulling through for a 2-time world champion right here. Again, nothing really interesting happened outside of McLaren and Ferrari, which is kind of the tail of the tape for this entire season. Still enjoyed it though. Catalonia, Spain. Exciting races as always. Really do love a bit of Spain. Actually turned out to be one of the better races this season. David Coulthard was in a fucking plane crash before this race and had problems with his ribs. He'd broken his ribs. He still chose to race. That doesn't show determination and desire to want the title. I don't know what does. Rubens Barrichello dead ass overtook both the Schumacher brothers on one corner just by taking the inside line. That was like a peach of a move, and I think it really did encapsulate how skilled the driver Barrichello was, that just having Schumacher as a teammate did wear people down, like Nico Rosberg has spoke about. It totally is a mental game that for some people you just can't get over, which is totally fair if you ask me. On top of that, Schumi ended up having an absolute nightmare of a stop as well, which totally gave the McLarens the massive lead. And Mika Häkkinen finally won his first race this season, and the McLarens were back in the fight. They were going to do it. I fully wanted to believe, knowing fine well they didn't do it, that they were going to do it. Oh, and De La Rosa retired, but what's uncommon there? Monaco, wow, a classic. Really, really, really love this race. Absolutely thrilled for it every time it comes round, every season. Yeah. What really made me laugh about this race is the hairpin blockade, where one car messes up on the hairpin and it totally ruined the entire race, so they had to start again after already having a false start because a car had stalled. So then that ended up meaning that there was 3 starts in this race. And the weirdest thing to me is that obviously there was backup cars, so Jenson Button's bolting it from the hairpin crash all the way back to the garage so he can jump in another car and start the race again. F1 was weird, man, and I certainly didn't look into all the proper rules and differences, because this is supposed to be like a casual video where I was just experiencing the 2000 season for the first time, but like, what the fuck? Ferrari's pulling a surprise shocker, pulling a Mercedes at the Sakir Grand Prix. They messed up and they totally gave this win to McLaren. And DC, baby, my main man, got his win, injured ribs from a plane crash still, and he's on the top step of the podium. He'd only finished 1 race here in 6 before this, and here he is standing on the top. Love to see it. And DC's mounting that title charge, and he's gonna win it. Oh, Austria, I love you. I love races here. And this race was really fun to watch too, because immediately Michael Schumacher's race was ruined. Rubens Barrichello was in the gravel. He made it out, but the McLarens were gone. They were up for this track and they were ready to fight. De La Rosa was in 3rd in this race as well, because there was no Ferraris really contending. And guess what happened? He retired. Again. McLaren's really did pull through on this track though. This was when things were going really well for them. Schumi kept retiring, and this was their big chance to really take back the points from Ferrari and bring the title fight back to them. When I googled the German GP, apparently voted one of the best races of all time, so I was kind of buzzed. I was ready to watch this. Barrichello started 18th, ended up winning this race. That's absolutely crazy. He was already up to 3rd by his 3rd stint, and this is obviously because it wasn't raining at the time. There was more stints because of the questionable weather, like going back and forth. But he really flew through this pack, and how he won is absolutely crazy. It's definitely one of the best races of all time, like was said. I don't know if it's one of my favourites, but it definitely gives me German vibes from when Sebastian Vettel came from 20th and went to 2nd. Absolutely crazy moments that this track produces, and we don't get it anymore. That's just devastating. Mr. FIA, give us both Nürburgring and Hockenheim, please. Please. Spa, as always, is a really exciting race in my opinion. I quite enjoy it. It was no different here. The qualifying was absolutely nuts. We had Mika Hakkinen in 1st, Jarno Trulli in 2nd, and Jenson Button in 3rd. Jenson Button qualifying 3rd is absolutely crazy to me, and I think that while we obviously didn't know he was going to go on and become a world champion, because at one point it wasn't even looking like he was going to be in the sport anymore, I think it did show that he was unbelievably skilled from a really young age. Ferraris were nowhere to be seen. Even DC wasn't pulling his weight. In this race was obviously the moment Mika messed up. Schumi ended up taking the lead, and there was this fight for the back, and then suddenly they both come up on the back marker, and we have that iconic move on Zonta. They both go around either side, and Mika overtakes both of them in one swift move. It is truly a peach, and I think it'll get better every time that I watch it. Obviously he ended up winning in the end, and again putting pressure on the Ferraris. They'd had their problems, and McLaren had seemed to have worked out their reliability issues. They were on it. McLaren looked like they were going to go for 3 years in a row. Obviously, in Malaysia, it's the end of the season, and Michael Schumacher did it. He won his 3rd WDC, his first in 5 years, and Ferrari won their first Constructors' Championship in a long time too. And we got these really iconic photos of both Barrichello and Schumi with their little red wigs on, which is just a sight to behold, really. While as a kid, Michael Schumacher to me was always like this hard ass, like this really stoic character, but he was still real. He's still a real person. He had fun, made jokes. He was just a really serious driver. So that was my season kind of wrap up of the year I was born. It's maybe not perfect. I didn't hit every nail. I didn't go for the details of the classifications. I just wanted to talk about the races and the differences in the way Formula 1 was. I had a lot of fun making this video. It took me a really long time because of just real life work and university. Now I've had my chance to actually film it, it's been really enjoyable. So if you did enjoy this, please let me know in the comments. Talk to me about what years you were born, what were your favourite races. Remember to leave a like and subscribe. Thank you very much.